Welcome to The Explainer. We're breaking down the stunning U.S. military intervention in Venezuela. We've got the capture of a president, a full takeover of the country's oil, and on the surface, yeah, it looks like a pretty straightforward power grab. But what if the real story, the one that's happening behind the scenes, is something else entirely?
Okay, let's just dive right in. This is the quote that set the world on fire. On January 3rd, President Trump basically announced an unprecedented U.S. takeover of another country. And he wasn't shy about it, saying the point was to bring in U.S. oil companies. You just don't hear stuff like this said out loud.
Now you might be thinking, whoa, where did this come from? And it's true, it feels like it happened overnight. But the reality is, this crisis has been building and escalating for weeks now, moving from the open ocean right into the presidential palace.
And when I say escalating, I mean fast. Just look at this timeline. In a little over 3 weeks, we went from seizing a single oil tanker to a complete naval blockade, then sanctions, and then boom, Operation Absolute Resolve is launched, and President Maduro himself is captured. It's absolutely dizzying stuff.
So Maduro gets captured, he's flown to New York to face these narcoterrorism charges, and that immediately creates this giant question mark hanging over the entire country. Okay, so who's actually running the show now?
And this is where it gets really messy. There's not one clear answer. You've basically got 3 different groups, all saying they should be in charge. You've got the U.S. task force on the ground, the remnants of Maduro's government led by his VP Delcy Rodriguez, and the internationally recognized opposition leader Maria Corina Machado. It's a classic and very dangerous power vacuum.
Now, Delcy Rodriguez is playing a very interesting and risky game here. She's refusing to officially take over as president, insisting Maduro is still in charge. She's trying to make the U.S. look illegitimate. But here's the irony. Her move created the very excuse the U.S. is using. They're basically saying, see, there's no official leader. We have to step in. It's a perfect constitutional catch-22.
So, as you can probably guess, the rest of the world is looking at this, and they are not on the same page. Not at all. This whole thing has kicked off a massive global debate about international law.
And this chart really just spells it out. You've got half the world, we're talking major players like China, Russia, and even Brazil, outright condemning this as international piracy. Then you have the EU in the middle, kind of wringing their hands and calling for restraint. And that leaves just a tiny sliver of countries openly supporting the U.S. action. The world is split right down the middle.
Of course, the immediate comparison everyone's making is to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and yeah, there are similarities. Both are pretty clear violations of the UN Charter, for example. But there are also some really key differences in how each superpower is trying to sell its actions to the world. The US is framing this as a temporary police action, whereas Russia just went for a straight-up annexation of territory.
Okay, but this is where the story starts to get really interesting. What if all this talk about democracy and international law and power vacuums, what if that's all just a smokescreen? Some analysts are looking at this and they're asking a really startling question, one that puts China right at the center of a much, much deeper game.
The theory goes something like this. The United States may have just won the battle for Caracas, but in doing so, it walks straight into a massive strategic trap, one that was carefully set by Beijing. So here's the playbook. Step 1, China gets to take the moral high ground, pointing at the U.S. as a rogue state. Step 2, they use this crisis to tell the world the U.S. dollar is unreliable, which helps push more countries toward their own BRICS financial system. And step 3, the real kicker, they now have a precedent. They can say, hey America, if you can do this in Venezuela, don't complain when we do something similar in Taiwan.
And this quote from an analyst just nails it, right? The U.S. got their man, but they might have just handed China a massive diplomatic victory. The more aggressive the U.S. looks, the more China gets to position itself as the stable, reasonable alternative on the world stage.
But hold on, because just when you think you've got it figured out, the story takes another even stranger turn. We've talked about them as rivals, as opponents. But what if, in this one instance, China and the U.S. aren't enemies at all? Now, I know this sounds like a wild conspiracy theory, but stick with me here, because there are a series of, let's call them bizarre coincidences, that have some serious people wondering if the U.S. and China were actually cooperating on this.
Just look at the evidence. A Chinese envoy meets with Maduro, and then, mere hours later, U.S. Special Forces raid that exact location. President Trump himself says on record that China will not take issue with this and will get the oil. Chinese tankers are being given safe passage through a U.S. blockade, and U.S. forces haven't touched a single Chinese-run oil facility in the country.
You start connecting those dots, and it looks less like a conflict and more like coordination.
So, okay, if they are working together, the billion-dollar question is why? What could possibly be so important that it would unite two global superpowers that are supposed to be rivals? Well, the answer might not be in politics. It might be in physics.
To get this, we have to quickly talk about a concept called EROI, Energy Return on Investment. It's basically an energy profit ratio. If it takes you 1 barrel of oil's worth of energy to drill a well, how many barrels do you get back out? A high EROI means you have tons of cheap, surplus energy to build and run a civilization.
Now here's the crucial number to remember, 10 to 1. Many scientists think that's the absolute minimum EROI a modern civilization needs just to tread water. If you drop below that, you don't have enough surplus energy to power everything, hospitals, schools, supply chains, and your society starts to decline.
And this chart, well, this is terrifying. That first bar is U.S. shale oil. Its EROI is about 5 to 1, way below that survival line. But that third bar, that's the potential of Venezuelan oil if it's modernized. We're talking an EROI of maybe 25 to 1. It's not just more oil, it's high-quality, high-profit energy. For a world starving for it, it's a lifeline.
And this explains this bizarre paradox we live in. We're constantly told there's an oil glut, but really, we're in a net energy famine. Think of it like this. Our civilization is surrounded by junk food. We're pumping more low-quality oil than ever, but it's not giving us the high-quality energy nutrition we need to survive, let alone power the coming AI revolution.
It kind of makes you think of this famous quote from Ronald Reagan, doesn't it? He wondered if an alien threat would unite us. Well, what if the alien threat isn't from space? What if it's a slow, silent enemy that threatens every one of us equally? The steady decline of our world's net energy.
And if you look at it through that lens, the entire Venezuelan crisis is completely reframed. This isn't a war over politics or ideology. This could be the first war of a new age, a desperate, perhaps even coordinated move by the world's biggest powers to secure the physical energy required for our collective survival.
So we're left with this one final, really provocative question that challenges everything we thought we knew. Is this intervention the first shot in a new kind of world war fought over energy? Or is it the first move in a secret global strategy for survival? What do you think is really going on?